Step 1. Gather your materials. You will need 1 skein of Caron Simply Soft yarn. I use the color Ocean. This yarn has a general medium bulkiness, so it will make sure that your hat is generally soft and smooth. You'll also need 5 knitting needles, size US 6 or 4 mm. You'll notice that they are double pointed so that we will be able to knit in the round. You will also need 1 pair of scissors and 1 large sewing needle that will help you tie in the ends of your hat. Here we have all of the materials we will need to make our hat. Step 2. Cast on. The first step here will be to make a slip knot and secure it on 1 needle. So you'll wrap it around 2 fingers, put a loop through the loop you just made with your fingers, and pull it through. So this knot will be able to be relaxed right into the yarn. You can pull it out like that, and this will be the easiest way to cast on. So go ahead and make that slip knot and put it on one of your needles. And we will secure this slip knot right onto our needle. Now that we have our first stitch on, we will begin to cast on. We're using a very simple method that is very good for beginners. So we will wrap it around our left thumb and secure it onto the needle like so. So you're wrapping it around and then going into the back of the stitch and putting it on your working needle. So you will continue this process until you have 88 stitches on your needle total. Step 3. Knit the first row. So now that we have 88 stitches on one needle, we will begin the first row. We're going to do a rib stitch that is good for the rim of your hat. So we'll start by doing the first stitch as a knit stitch. So there is 1 knit stitch, and then we will do a purl stitch following that knit stitch. So slip that knit stitch off and purl the next one. We will follow this pattern for the entire first row, alternating between knit stitch and purl stitch. So something to note is that when you reach the end of a needle, this will be after 22 stitches. So once you have knitted and purled those first 22 stitches, we will pick up a new needle and transfer over. So here we are at the end of our first needle. We just did 22 stitches of alternating knit and purl, and this is how we will begin a new needle. So you will just pick up the new needle and knit onto that one instead. You want to make sure that these new needles are very close together so that you're not building a gap into your project. And so you'll do the same thing. You'll continue until you get 22 stitches onto the new needle and switch again. Step 4. Complete the circle. So you'll notice that we have 22 stitches on all 4 needles at this point. When you're about to complete the circle, make sure that your project is straight and nothing is twisted. And what you will do is you will take the last 4 stitches there and knit them onto your last needle. So here we're going to do 1 more knit stitch with our yarn. Following that, 1 more purl stitch. So here we are purling it, and then knitting again, and purling again. And this will ensure that your hat is a full circle and that there are no gaps with it. So take a new needle and then just begin doing the same ribbing that you were doing before for our first row. Step 5. Knit the rim. So now that our knitting is joined together as a circle on 4 needles, we will do this rim row to create a ribbing for our hat. So you will alternate between knitting and purling. When you finish a needle and you get the end to it, you will just pick up the old needle that you had used and use it as the new needle. So this is a good way to replace needles as you go, and you will only ever need 5 needles throughout your project. You will continue this process doing a knit and purl alternate for 10 full rows around the rim of your hat. Step 6. Knit the hat. So we have a lovely rim knitted here. We have our 10 rows up and down of our rib stitch, and we will begin knitting the main portion of the hat. So for this portion, we are going to alternate between 2 rows. The first, we are going to knit the entire row, every stitch. So here we knit the first stitch, and we will continue to knit, not switching between knit and purl, for the entire length until we get to the end of our 4th needle. So here we are with our project. Just at the end of that 4th needle, we're finishing our entire row of knit stitch. So once that is done, we will alternate to the other row we are doing. So we did knit all the way around there. So now that that is done, we are going to do an alternating row of knit and purl, just like that rib or our first 10 rows of the rim were. So here we are knitting the first one, and then we are purling the second, and knitting again, and alternating between knit and purl for the entire row. You will do this switching between knitting an entire row and knit purling an entire row until the hat measures 8 inches total, and this will include the rim measurement. Okay, so here I just wanted to show you what our hat is going to look like almost finished. So this is 8 inches from the end to right where our knitting needles are, and that is of the alternating rows of all knitting and knit purling. Step 7. Decrease the hat. So for this first row of decreasing, we will do 1 knit stitch, 1 purl stitch, and we're going to do something that's called a knit 2 together. So instead of inserting into 1 stitch, we will put our needle through 2 stitches as if we were knitting both together, and pulling them off as 1 knit stitch. So this is a way to decrease the amount of stitches you have with your hat. So we're going to do that several times so that our hat closes in at the top. So for this entire row, we're going to alternate and do a knit purl, knit 2 together, purl knit, and a purl 2 together. So that is our purl 2 together. You will just insert it into 2 stitches as if it were 1, and purling it off as 1. And you will repeat all of these stitches for the entire row of the hat, ending up with 59 stitches after completing this row. Here we are after our first decrease row of the hat. We have 59 stitches total. Now we will knit every stitch for this next part. Here we just finished our knitting all stitches row for the decrease portion. So we're going to move on to number 3 within step 7. So we will do another decrease row of knit, purl, knit 2 together, purl, knit, purl 2 together for the entire row. We will end up with 40 stitches after completing this, and then we will knit all of the stitches once more for our 4th row of the decrease. So we just finished another knitting all of the stitches row. That was number 4 within step 7. So we'll move on to number 5. Here we are going to decrease by doing a knit 2, purl 2, knit 2, purl 2 alternating pattern for the entire row, and we will end up with 20 stitches after completing this row. After that, we will knit all of the stitches for another round, and then our final decrease, number 7 in step 7, we will knit 2 together, purl 2 together, and repeat from there. So here we are starting this row. We will knit 2 together, and then purl 2 together. And we'll do this for our entire row, then do 1 knitting row, and this same knitting 2 together, purling 2 together row. Step 8, finish the hat. So here we are, we have 10 stitches left on our needles. We just finished number 7 within step 7 of decreasing the hat. we are going to leave a yarn tail of about 2 feet long. We're going to cut this with our scissors. And now we are going to work to thread this yarn through the rest of our stitches to close the hole of the hat. So take your large sewing needle here, thread the yarn through it, and now we are going to take off the stitches from the knitting needles and put it through our yarn sewing needle. So we're going to go around through the whole length of the hat, slipping each stitch off as we go. So I'm showing this process here for you. Slip it onto our blue sewing needle, off of the needle, all the way around our 4 needles. So once you have all of the needles slipped off, you will pull the yarn through everything to close the top of our hat together. Here I pulled the yarn through the rest of our remaining needles, and so we just have one leftover string. We are going to knot it on the top, pushing down as far as we can, and then we will thread in this remaining end into our hat so it remains invisible. So with this, if you're familiar with using a sewing needle, you will just string it through a little bit of the hat, pull it on the other side, and we're just going to pull it into a couple pieces throughout the hat so that it stays secured in place. But if you would rather just cut it here and leave a little string on the inside of the hat, that is fine too. Here I'm showing you how to just weave it through a couple of the ends to keep it secured. So once you have put it through those, you can pull it into place, pushing it through those little pieces, and cut the remaining end of your yarn off. And once you have done this, you've sewed in the ends of your hat and your hat is completed. So cut it with your scissors here and turn it inside out for your completed hat project. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and now you know how to make your very own slouchy hat.